Hey Zaka family! Zaka is launching an exclusive membership platform to provide you with career development workshops, coaching, community, and so much more. Go to ZakaConnect.com and sign up to receive information on how to access early registration and perks.
Hello, everybody. This is Paul Herman, the Prince of Motivation and host of Zaka Presents My Journey. We're creating this vulnerable and positive platform where you can get inspired and motivated from different leaders from our community. Today, our guest is Shai Poulard, who is the head of diversity, equity, inclusion, and belonging at Nerdwallet. Shai, welcome to the show.
Thank you, Paul.
Oh, come on. And first off, I just want to say that title is very long. You're long, and I could only imagine that it's been a long journey to acquire all those words right before your name or even after your name. So we're going to dive into that a little bit, and we're going to talk a little bit about how you got there. But before we get into that journey of your life, could you just kind of share with the listeners a little bit more about your cultural background and where you grew up?
Yeah, absolutely. So super excited to be here. Thank you so much. And excited to dive in. So a little bit about me, and I'll start with my cultural background because it's so important to me. So I am Haitian American, first generation, born in Los Angeles, California. And fun fact, I still live in Los Angeles, California, which most people say, you're rare. And I'm like, it's like every time I thought maybe I should go explore a different part of the world, an opportunity just presented itself here. And honestly, it's not a bad place to call home. And so lived here all my life, and being of Caribbean descent in LA, it was definitely interesting, having to explain cultural background and how that differ from some of the more common backgrounds here, and people not really understanding, or even when they did know about where I was from, it was very, the negative stereotypes. And it's funny, I laugh at my brother all the time now that Haiti just seems to be so popular and everybody wants to be Haitian or say surpassing or shout us out in a hip hop song. So it's nice to see the culture really being represented and people really understanding the impact that Haiti has had on liberation and freedom and revolutions, throughout history, which I think makes all the sense in the world that I would be a diversity, equity, inclusion, and belonging professional, because I think it's just rooted in my DNA. So it's a little more about me.
Mm-hmm. Okay. Well, shout out to that the Haitian culture. A lot of the previous guests have shared about the Haitian culture and what it means to them, and how it's kind of like that upbringing, being in a Haitian household, has kind of helped them in their career. And I could only assume that it's probably done the same thing for you. But what are
100%.
two pivotal moments in your childhood that kind of shape you in today?
Ooh, that's such a great question. So, there's two that really stand out to me that stayed with me. One happened very early. So I believe I was about 7 years old. And so I'll share a little bit about my household and my upbringing. My dad, very, very proud Haitian man, and was very committed to ensuring that me and my brother, so I have one younger brother, that we had everything we needed to be successful and succeed. And so he did not play about grades. He didn't really care about anything else that we did if the grades were right. And so that's something that I internalized, where I was like, if my grades are right, he's off my back. I have the freedom that I need. So there was one particular moment, a time where I was assigned an assignment. And it was a weather assignment where we had to go and find a newspaper. And I don't even remember all the prompts, but it was something related to, finding different aspects of the weather and the climate. And of course, being a 7-year-old, procrastinated and waited to the last second. So I remember telling my mom, I really need this newspaper to do my homework. So we're driving around the city, trying to find a newspaper. For whatever reason, this was back in the day, so I'm going to date myself, where there was no, LAtimes.com. There was no Instagram, right? Newspapers were in a little tiny box on the street, and you would pay 25 cents, right, to pull out this newspaper. So,
the boxes.
Remember those days? The boxes,
yeah.
right?
With the glass, you could see right inside.
with the glass that you can see right inside. So you can imagine it being 7 p.m., all the newspapers are gone, right? So we took a break. We were hungry, and my mom stopped at McDonald's. And I remember there was a gentleman, and he seemed to be homeless, and he had a newspaper, right? And one thing about, being first generation and having parents that, are not from America, there are a lot of things that, parents internalize, right? The media was very influential on how our parents saw the world, So, of course, there was a little bit of fear of me going to have a conversation with this gentleman. But for me, I was like, look, I got to get this assignment done because if I don't, I'm going to be in trouble, right? So I walk over and I, ask the gentleman, hey, does your newspaper have a weather section? And he said, actually, it does. So he takes it, he gives it to me. And I'm so juiced that I got this weather section that I'm not even really paying attention. So I'm circling all the things that I need to circle. And he goes, can I ask you, what are you doing? And I was like, oh, I have this project. And I'm see my mom from across the room looking at me like, if you don't get back over here right now.
Oh, yeah.
But I'm so excited that I'm like, I'm working on this, project, and here's all the things that I have to answer, and here are all the questions. And he was like, okay, I can help you. So he starts answering the questions, kind of with me. And so then I asked him, just like, I'm just curious, like, how do you know so much about, the weather? And he was like, oh, actually, I was a meteorologist. And he said that I got laid off, and, my wife left me and took the kids, and I never bounced back. And at 7 years old, that was a moment for me where I internalized that we are all human and everyone has a story, right? And it's really important to not judge a book by the cover and take it a step further. It's really important that we look at, who society has turned their back on, and really uncover the rhyme and the reason and the why, and really work to solve those root problems, right? So kind of from that moment on, and obviously, being a kid, by the time I got into high school and college, mentorship, advocacy, giving back, really helping organizations focus in on processes and policies to not just be inclusive internally, but also look out and say, okay, if we're a $1 million company and we're operating in a community where people are being displaced, right? What types of opportunities that we can provide that can essentially make sure that people are not left behind, and people of these communities can also get these opportunities at our company. And that's kind of always stuck with me. So that was pivotal moment number one.
Okay, Rocket, come on, drop them today.
So pivotal moment number two for me is when I decided that I did not want to pursue a medical degree. So I was just growing up on the fast track to being a doctor, and for my Haitian, specifically like Caribbean folks, I honestly think most first generation people, we know that there's 4 professions that you can pursue in a household: as doctor, lawyer, engineer, and disappointment. And so, I was on the fast track to medical school. Was in a math science magnet in high school. Was an undergraduate biology degree, and through an internship opportunity, I learned that being a medical doctor just wasn't for me, and for several reasons. One, I'm highly empathetic. And so it was one of those things that if I continued down that path, I would have either become very desensitized, or I would have had a stroke by the time I was 30, right? And didn't want to really do either of those. And so that was challenging for me, right? Because it was something that I had just convinced myself that I was going to do. And it was something that my parents were very proud of. So having to come and say like, hey, I don't want to do this anymore was very disappointing, to my parents. But I think the impact that it had on me was I understood that the reason why it was so disappointing for them is because, they saw that as a guaranteed path of success. So my mission became, no matter what I did, I had to be successful, right? So it just made me work 10 to 15 times harder to ensure that I was successful, because at the end of the day, I know they want to leave this earth knowing that we are okay. By we, I mean me and my brother. And so, in everything that I do, I always give 110% to just signal like I'm okay, like I'm thriving, and now, funny enough, they look and they're like, my dad sometimes says, you make more than, a doctor. And I'm like, I know, right? I'm doing just fine. So yeah, so those are kind of my two moments.
Okay. I like how you dropping some gems. driven to some stuff. And I mean, because, you know, other people kind of share those pivotal moments as well, too,
Right.
in their own way. Now, what are some like qualities and values that you learned from like your parents? And 'cause you talked about your parents a little bit, hinted on, but like what kind of like values did you learn from your parents that, you know, have something that is meaningful to you and has helped you? Why?
Yeah, 1000%. So the first one is it's not about you as an individual, it's about the collective. So ensuring that everything that you do supports and pours into a collective. So growing up, you know, I grew up in a working class household, but my parents never shied away from lending a helping hand. If somebody just came from Haiti and didn't have a place to stay, they were staying with us. If, you know, somebody like, so, and I can even just give some historical context. So in the early 90s, there was a huge Haitian refugee crisis where a lot of different charitable organizations pledged to sponsor and take in Haitian refugees that were in Guantanamo Bay, Cuba. My parents were two of three individuals that decided to start up a center and really take in, you know, and I can't remember the exact number, you know, of Haitians, and that by taking it was like provide support, connect them with resources, take them to doctors' appointments, and, you know, all translate and the full gamut of what it takes to, you know, support and sponsor. And so as a kid, really observing that, you know, we didn't have much, but we had more, right? And so
Okay.
being
Good way to
able
put it.
to, you know, so being able to just extend that little more that we had that, you know, paid dividends in the form of blessings, in the form of community. And so that's something that stays with me till today. Like, it's always important to pay it forward, because from practicing a gratitude mindset, right? No matter how much you think you're struggling, there's probably always somebody that's struggling a little bit more, right? And if we get into that mindset and that habit of focusing on the collective as opposed to the individual, what turns into what is currently lack quickly turns into abundance. Because if you got corn, I got rice, right? If I got rice, the next person has beans. If the next person has beans, you know, then the person after that has chicken. And if we put all that together, we have a meal. You know, so that's a value that I definitely learned from my parents. The other one is how to make $1 out of 15 cents, and this is a
Come
story
on,
that
we
I
gonna
love to tell.
stretch that. We gonna stretch that.
Stretch it, right? Stretch it, because, you know, but budgets were limited, but I never felt lack. I never went hungry, and it's because my mom was a whiz. When I tell you, grocery shopping day for us was a field trip. We would wake up, shower, get dressed, and my mom would have all, and I'm dating myself again. My mom would have all the sales papers laid out, and she would have, you know, toilet paper is on sale here, chicken is on sale there, fruit is on sale, you know, at the other grocery store. And we would pack up the car and we would go, and, you know, it's about 3 or 4 different grocery stores. And I was excited because every grocery store we went to, and it was back in the day where they had the candies in bulk. So my mom would always let us pick out a caramel or mint or, you know, little strawberry candies at every store that we went to. It wasn't until I was older, actually. I might have been sharing that with somebody in college, and they're like, "Really? You know, we just went to one grocery store." And I was like, "Huh? I thought everybody went to multiple grocery stores and had a grocery shopping day." And then it hit me, it was like, no, my mom she had a family to feed, right? And she didn't want to sacrifice quality, you know, and quality of food. So she made herself stretch, and she made her dollar stretch. So I pair that to my career now, and I've for the last, I want to say 5 or 6 years, I've worked in these rapid growth startup companies, right, where you're doing a lot with very little. And the skill and the value that just observing my mom really make $1 out of 15 cents is me, is I can do the same. You give me a limited budget, you give me $5,000, and I will create something that looks like it costs $50,000. Because if I have a limited budget, I'm not going to order from the bougie bakery, right? I'm gonna drive to Rouse and pick up the cupcakes that are $1.25 versus the cupcakes that are $4.95.
We're gonna save today.
We're gonna save, right? We're gonna stretch, and we're gonna continue to index on quality. And that's, you know, not only a value, but just a skill that, you know, my mom imparted in me. And when I shared this with her, she laughed because she wasn't trying to impart that in me. So I learned it more through observation, right? And her actions.
It is something across the board. I really have to appreciate the Caribbean culture. You know, other cultures obviously say those lines as well too, but I remember growing up in my household, the same thing. My father would say, we're going to make $1, how to stretch $1 out of, and stretch it, so it's 100 pennies. Like he would say, we have $1 here, but we really have 4 quarters. But we have 10 dimes. But he would keep going until he got to but there's actually 100 pennies here. But I'm telling my pops, I'm like, Dad, what we gonna buy with 100 pennies? Mind you, the 100 pennies do make $1.
Right.
But to me, it wasn't registering at that time that he wasn't saying it just for the dollar. He was like, the $100 is 100 single dollars, right?
Right.
So it's just a way of that concept and that mindset. And you're right. I laughed heavy when you said, it was lawyer, doctor, or there was another one that you said, or disappointment.
Engineer and disappointment.
Oh yeah, it was like we're gonna cut you right now. You're not even our kid no more if you don't want to follow the protocol and get this going, right? So
listen, they're like, HR, what is that? Never heard of it.
That's right. We're gonna stop right there. Now, mind you, HR is needed all around the world and all these other stuff. But this is where I bring into the next thing, which is your education. Like, speak a little bit more about your educational journey and how you prepared for your first job.
Yeah, how I prepared for my first job. My career has been a journey. So I'll go back to when I came to the decision to not, be a medical doctor. So my undergraduate degree is in biology. And at the time, I said, okay, I still want to hold on to this degree. I have an analytical mind. So I was like, research and development sounds like a good career choice. So decided to go into research and development. But I graduated, I'll date myself more directly. I graduated undergrad in 2009. And if anyone remembers, 2009 was the downturn of the economy. So jobs that were abundant in 2008 were no longer available in 2009. And so I think just being somebody, and another value that I learned from my parents is like not figuring out, like staying in this state of analysis paralysis or defeat is not an option. So we just got to figure it out. Right. And so I said, okay, when I was in undergrad, I worked at Macy's for the summer and also for like the winter holiday, right? They would hire temp people for the winter because everyone's Christmas shopping. And I said, all right, well, let me go back to, what I know, the experience that I had while I look for a job in research. So I worked at Macy's, and then shortly after that, I got a second job working at Chase Bank as a teller. And the reason why I'm sharing these two examples is because it's funny how life comes back full circle, right? And I like to share this with folks. It's like, if you think you're stuck, or if you think that where you are is where you'll be, especially if you're disengaged and unhappy, like, use my journey as like life always comes back full circle, and you don't get a thought without it meaning something. So I remember being in this training center. So when I got hired as a teller at Chase, we had to do 3 days of training. Of course, consistency and accuracy is incredibly important. And I remember looking at the trainer and going, that seems like a cool job, right? And I was like, I could see myself doing this one day. And it was a 30-second thought and didn't think about it again, right? Mm-hmm. And knowing at the time that I still wanted to do research, and I forgot to share that my plan in this life was to work for a research institution, find the cure of some disease, and retire on somebody's beach at 35. That didn't happen, but that's what I was married to at the time, right? And so I always had that mindset that both of those jobs, so Macy's and Chase, were temporary. However, I gave 150%, right? I treated them like they were my dream job because it's just my approach to life. And I do think that every opportunity we are blessed with is an opportunity to develop and grow and learn a new skill. And so as I was at Chase, I worked for a very small branch, and a lot of the times it was slow. And this was, again, back in the day before social media and all things. So I only had access to trainings at the branch. So it was either I was going to sit there and stare at my coworkers, or I was going to do these trainings. And Chase was one of those companies, and I don't know if it's still that way, but back then, no matter who you were, what role you held, you can do any of the training. So I did the entry-level trainings all the way up to the upper management trainings. And so when you asked the question around, like, how I prepared, I started kind of there building the muscle of being a learner first. And so even though I wasn't in school anymore, and I'm not in school anymore now, my approach to career and education is always being a learner. So because I took all those trainings, I got a lot of growth opportunities, when I worked at Chase, just because I happened to be the only person in the branch that knew how to do these really complicated things. Taking that to finally finding what I thought was my dream job in biotech, it was, kind of one and the same, right? I was always networking with people. I was always like talking to people and understanding, well, what do you do? And how does your role fit in the greater ecosystem of like what we're trying to do as a company? And as a result of that, there were moments where we were low on supplies. And because I had built relationships with people on the other side of the building that did similar things that we did, I was always an asset to the team, even though, and I'm going to drop something here, even though sometimes who we are naturally and who we are in our authenticity does not match the culture of where we are. So interestingly enough, my approach to being a learner first and building relationships was not well received at that lab, right? And I won't say the lab, but at the lab, I won't say which lab, but at that particular lab. However, that was the beginning of me going through a journey of really understanding where should I be and what am I being called to? And is this marriage and the career marriage that I, made, is it the right one for me? Right. So I know, we're going to get to a few other things, but I'll pause there with, that's my approach. And I think the biggest learning was in being authentic in your approach to education and career. You really learn on where you should be versus where you think you should be.
Mm-hmm. And that's what inspired you to make the shift.
That's what, yes.
And that helped you align a little bit more with your passion for inclusion and belonging.
1,000%, 1,000%. Like,
and that's that's a big role to take on, especially in the world today.
Right.
Everybody wants to be a part of something, but then it's hard to put the pieces together, because when you have to put pieces together, the word diversity has to come into play, right?
1,000%.
Trust, respect,
vulnerability.
That is correct. Vulnerability. There are words that come along with that, right? That sometimes we be like, oh yeah, our office is diverse. We have a whole bunch of people from all over the world, right? But we don't talk about those things in the office. Like, so what part of the world are you from? And sharing those experiences and goods and bads of that culture, so people get more informed the right way. Because we already know how the media goes sometimes. It's only going to depict sometimes the worst things. And even in school, we know it from back in the days. Like, we would only learn the things that they wanted to teach us in school. It was only after college, a lot of us, or after high school, we realized that there was a lot more to the story that wasn't even told.
Right. And even how they displayed it sometimes, right? Like black and white to show to signal that it was a lot older than what it really is. So
it's so crazy. But I commend individuals like yourself and all the previous guests that have been on the show that are in this lane right here, really trying to really bring awareness, really put the word inclusion and belonging into the forefront, because that is a very big role to take on, because it's not just bringing one type of individual into the room, right? You represent everybody at the end of the day. So kudos to you. Kudos.
Thank you.
Because I know some people might not like it. They might go, oh, here we go with this another inclusion meeting. Here we go with this another diversity thing going on, right? But it's important to hear those words and to keep it in the forefront, right? Just as as much as people keep their paychecks in the forefront, let's keep inclusion and belonging. So kudos to you and the team.
Thank you.
Before your current role, you mentioned about banking, biotech, entertainment. Like, how do these experiences shape an approach that help your career?
Yeah, great question. So, and I was actually just talking about this yesterday. So, number one, it helps me understand the type of environment that I want to work in. So, if we can get, vulnerable for a second, my experience in biotech was not great. It was the first time for me where I experienced imposter syndrome, and I didn't even know what was happening. So prior to that, I'd always been the overachiever, right? School worked. I grew up in South Los Angeles, which is a very diverse place. I happened to grow up in so we, at one point in my life, so around 13, 14, my parents' financial situation got a little bit better. We moved to a different part of South Los Angeles where I'm surrounded around Black and brown excellence, right? Black and brown humble excellence, So I like to share this that, for me, I went to a high school that I had just incredible Black and brown faculty that spoke love and light and empowerment into us as, Black students. And so I was fearless, right? And I navigated the world with the mindset of like, I can do anything I set my mind to and you can't tell me otherwise. And it really was the driver of my success. Compared to my time in biotech, where now I'm in an environment where I'm experiencing a level of microaggression I had never experienced in my life, right? Where no one is asking me about my educational background or my credentials, but they're asking me like the criteria of being a gangster. They're asking me to teach them how to Dougie. And whatever, right? But then it's like when you observe, and I'm sitting back and I'm observing, but you're asking this other person the research that they worked on and the undergrad that they went to, like, what is this, And then going back to my point around me learning that your authenticity sometimes and your superpowers don't align with your environment, that was exactly that. My ability to build relationships, my ability to be a learner first was very different from everyone else on the team, including, people that had influence on my growth, right? And so it was the first time where I really started to go, wow, like I've never experienced this. I'm starting to doubt myself. I'm miserable. Now I'm angry, right? So I'm completely outside of who I am. So that was my first introduction of like, okay, it's clearly me and not them, right? Whether right or wrong. And so now I need to figure out what drives me and what motivates me, right? So what I realized very quickly, I shouldn't say quickly, 4 years in, right? I realized like, okay, there's a people aspect and a people connection aspect to who I am that I want to explore, right? So moved to another company where I did get an opportunity to interface with people regularly, and I did get an opportunity to build relationships. But at that particular company, I learned like, if I am not aligned with the mission and who I'm working with and for, right, I'm also not happy, right? And that became that crossroads for me where I said, okay, at this point, it's really not them, it's me. So now I need to figure out what's next. And I had two options. I could either go and pursue an advanced degree in science, or I can do something completely different. So I reflected on, okay, I love mentorship. I love creating programs. And naturally, I became the person that started just creating these belonging initiatives before it was even coined a term, or taking people under my wing that had just joined the company that, also didn't necessarily have a tribe or feel that sense of belonging and say, all right, here's how I did it. Here's what I did. Here are the mistakes that I made. So let's try to make a better experience for you. So give you some insight into how I think. I thought that I was going to create a role that can allow me to be analytical, solve complex problems, but also help businesses understand that people are your number one asset. You can have the dopest product in the world, but if you don't have an engaged workforce that feels like they can be their true authentic selves, you really run the risk of not maximizing your success, right? So that's when I took a step back and said, okay, I want something that's a bit more broad. I want to be able to kind of choose my own adventure. And so I landed on MBA, left the working world, full 2 years, and just fully immersed myself in being a learner first, because that's what centers me. And that was what reminds me of who I am at my core. So went back to school, pursued my MBA, did very well, came out of it knowing that I wanted to work for a mission-driven company. And I really wanted to be able to operate in an environment where I could be close to the work, right? I don't have to jump through 7 different hoops and loops to get something done, right? And so in all of those, so what you saw was like the banking, the biotech, and like I mentioned earlier, the banking introduced me to a world of training and development, right? Biotech introduced me to a world of what I didn't want and the environment that I didn't want to be in. And it also made me lose myself for a bit. And then past, right, grad school, the entertainment taught me that I'm a creative and I love to be in creative spaces, right? Not necessarily in the entertainment industry, but I love to bring creativity and music into my role and my approach to work. And now moving forward, where I've pretty much been in aerospace, micromobility, telecom, and now fintech. And so kind of some of these industries also taught me that I don't necessarily really care about the industry anymore, right? But I do have to align with the mission of the company, right? And that mission has to be centered around empowerment or empowering individuals or providing individuals with a tool and a resource to be better. But as long as I can do that and I can still, be at that intersection of diversity, equity, inclusion, and then that training and that development, I'm pretty much good to go.
And this is where I have to ask this next question, which is a very important thing about the DEI. A lot of employers like don't really understand what the head of diversity, inclusion, and belonging, like the importance of it. Could you just kind of like help us out with a little bit more of like the responsibilities, like whether it be the day-to-day or just like the long-term goals? It might be easier said than done, but what does that look like?
Yeah, so there's 2 facets to it. There's the internal piece and there's the external piece. So I'll start with the internal. Really the role, and the role that I sit in is to help the organization and the organization as a whole understand that people drive the success of your company, and how you engage and empower your employees is really the output and the outcome that you're going to get, right? And so in my day-to-day, this is just in general, so this is just my day-to-day and my career on this side, I like to say on this side of the chaos, is really helping managers and leaders unleash those diverse perspectives on the team, while also embedding what we call inclusive practices and policies and how we operate as a company. So that is everything from how we evaluate performance, and is that objective and is that fair, right? And are we seeing any disparities? For example, are we seeing that majority of the people that are neutral or have a neutral performance evaluation happen to be people of color versus not, right? That's also all in how we embed it in our recruiting practices. And one thing that I love to coin is, as a company, it's really important to make sure that your employees mirror the consumers that you serve. Because if they don't mirror the consumers that you serve, you have a perspective gap, right? Mm-hmm. And so there's a and we see it all the time, right? All these brands that make these missteps that you're like, really? Like, did you have the right voices in the room? Because I promise, if you had the right voices in the room, you wouldn't have made that misstep, because somebody would have said, you might want to switch that shirt. You might not want to roll out that campaign, or you might want to tweak it a little bit, because it's just not going to land and resonate with a specific community. And so that's where the head of DEI role is super powerful, is really advising and consulting and building practices and policies to ensure that not only do you have a diverse workforce that mirrors your consumer base, but that workforce feels empowered, they feel supported, they feel like there's equal opportunities to develop and grow. And I'm giving a very high level snapshot of, what it entails, but at any moment in every day, we are focusing on, embedding these policies into all the things that companies naturally have and roll out. Now, the external piece of it is also ensuring that consumers also see themselves and feel a sense of belonging in brands. And I'm gonna tie it back to my culture. Haitians love Hondas and Toyotas, right? Mostly Toyotas, but we were a Honda family. And from the time I was a kid to now, like we got 3 Hondas in the driveway, right? And all the consumer reports could come out and say, you know, Hyundai is the #1 most reliable, Kia, you know, BMW, whatever, right? And we will still go and get that Honda, right? And I share that to say that, you know, communities of color in general, that brand loyalty is so real. Like I'm kind of an outlier now. So I did get a new car and it's not a Honda. And we started out loving AT&T and Spectrum. And now I'm diversifying and I got the YouTube TV and I got some of these other things, right? So I'm the one that's kind of the disruptor, you know, and going against the cultural norm. But the reality is that brand loyalty is there. And when companies are not really thinking about how to maximize reach and how to not shift how you operate, not change how you operate, but shift it just a little bit depending on your audience, how much of a return on investment you'll get. Right. And so ahead of DEIB, and I'll speak specifically, you know, kind of for my approach to work, is also finding ways to embed inclusion in our products, right? So that consumers can look in and say, oh yeah, I rock with Nike, right? Because I see myself in Nike, you know? So that's like high level, kind of the 2 facets of how the role can operate and how I like to operate as a DIB professional.
And I know in your profession that you have to have a voice, like you have to be open and willing to speak up. Like when did you learn how to use your voice?
Woo, that is a word. When did I learn how to use my voice? It was when I went back to grad school. So remember, prior to grad school, that for me, imposter syndrome was real. And I definitely operated more dimming my shine, keeping my head down, and just doing the work. And when I made the decision to leave the working world for 2 years, I was going into grad school with a sense of defeat, but with a sense of optimism as well. And so I had a decision to make. I was like, I'm going to either come in here and operate how I have been operating, which made me wildly unhappy, which was just keeping my head down, doing the work, not saying much, not really feeling impactful. Or I was going to take this opportunity where it's kind of a safer place to just be unapologetic about, you know, what needs to be done and how it should be done. And I chose the latter. And I was fortunate to be in an environment where that was embraced and it was accepted. I also learned the art of influence, right? On how to use your voice to drive impact by tailoring how you communicate. And again, not changing, but tailoring how you communicate to specific audiences. So I really built that muscle of like, okay, I need you to do X. So I need to find out what's going to motivate you to do X. And that's pay dividends in my role, right? Because you said it earlier, Paul, of like, you know, sometimes people say, well, I don't want to go to that inclusion training. Or here she comes again telling us that we need to be inclusive. Or, you know, we need to shift how we operate, but how we operate works, right? So my job is to not tell you or be highly prescriptive. My job is to help you understand why this shouldn't be negotiable, right? Like why you will be unsuccessful if you are not tweaking and shifting how you operate. And so I really learned that and found that voice, which I think I've had it all along. Growing up in a Haitian household, sometimes to do certain things you have to negotiate, right? I had to negotiate where I had to. I had to paint.
You had to find your voice in that house.
Listen, and you have to find a way to shift, you know, some preconceived notions about things that we knew were not true, but our parents held on to, and that's what they believed, right? But didn't realize it back then. But when I was, of course, in grad school, that's where I really learned the art of like using my voice and using my voice for good and taking the risk to really influence folks to do the right thing without negative consequence. So,
now, what are like ways you help manage challenges? You know, marginalized individuals in the workplace.
Great question. So, for me, it's twofold. I start with who controls the challenges, right? And what I mean by that is I start with who controls the challenges for marginalized people in the workplace, which is oftentimes non-marginalized people, right? So my approach to this space is actually through the lens of allyship. My goal when I enter any organization is to ensure marginalized voices have what they need to thrive and succeed. So that'll be programs, it'll be, communities, resource groups, coaching and development. I always make myself available for that. But on the flip side, I'm indexing a little more on building allies in the workplace. And I have this conversation often where an employee spends maybe 2 hours with me in a training, right? They spend 40 hours with their manager, right? So you can, as a company, you can roll out all the development programs, you can roll out all the resource groups, you can roll out all the initiatives for marginal, underrepresented folks. But if we are not building managers into allies to understand the impact of microaggressions, to understand the impact of bias, to understand their responsibility to show up and build trust and champion feedback fortitude, especially when it comes to really developing and supporting their underrepresented employees, we miss the mark. Right. So a lot of what I do is I take a holistic approach to DEIB where I'm like, okay, as a manager, it's really important that you're passing the mic. It's really important that you're looking out. And as you mentioned this earlier, Paul, around diversity and all the layers of diversity, right?
Yep.
Taking that a step further, there's intersectionality, there's nuances, right? My Haitian story, Haitian American story is different from the next person's Haitian American story, and values and skills that we build are different and they look different, right? And so even when somebody may think they have it figured out and I know exactly how to engage my team, and I know exactly how to bring the best out of them, you don't, because we're human and we're nuanced and things change, right? And so a lot of my focus is around managers and colleagues. How are we building the muscle of being uncomfortable, being a learner first, knowing we're going to make missteps and being open to that feedback so we can truly show up for each other in a way that creates that true inclusion, right? It's not avoiding, I don't know how to engage with Paul, so I'm just going to avoid it altogether. And now Paul is looking at me like, well, I'm the male, I'm the only male on the team, right? And so my, female boss, even though she's Black like me, she don't really rock with me, right? And it's not that I don't rock with you, it's because I just don't know how to engage. And so my approach is always like, that's not an excuse, right? If you don't know how to engage, I am here to support you in figuring that out, but we have to engage, right? So that's my personal approach to making sure our underrepresented employees feel that sense of belonging. And a lot of the times I focus there, of course, but I actually equally, and if not more, focus on the other side.
I mean, you that was definitely a great way of breaking down that scenario where, two people might look alike, but then they don't even know how to engage with each other because it's like, right. I don't know. And then it causes that, people looking at you sideways. And then other people say, right. Well, if they're not connected, then I don't know if I should connect with this person. And before you know, it becomes like a very uncomfortable, environment where people are just like, right. It's artificial. It's like, hey, how you doing? Right. But really, we're really not connected. And right. People like to talk about themselves, right? For the most part, right? And definitely, I know people love to talk about their culture because it's a part of them. It's a part of their right. DNA structure. So if people had more opportunities to speak on their culture and speak about their life, it then hopefully could bring other people to like more awareness to the next person. Like, oh, now I get why you do that because it's a part right. of the culture. Oh, now versus looking at the person like, I don't even know why you're doing that right now. This is an office, but there's a reason why right. I do that. It's part of the culture, but you're not asking that question. And more importantly, we're not connecting, so you would never know, So it's just a lot of those uncertain moments for a lot of individuals. But if the wall was broken down or the wall was attempted to kind of take away a few bricks from that wall, people would see right. how bright and how loving it is on the other side. You just got to just put yourself out there, and that's what we talked about. You mentioned that key word earlier, listeners: vulnerability. You need that.
We don't know what we don't know.
That's right. Now, could you elaborate like how companies could empower their culture to support and empower diverse talent?
Yeah, 1,000%. And it's what keeps me up at night, right? And at minimum, and I'm speaking to a lot of the companies that have deprioritized this work, right? Is you have to provide the channels of communication. And what I mean by that, and you asked a powerful question around, how did I find my voice, right? And some part of it was me finding it myself, but the other part of it is the environment that I was in nurtured my voice, right? And the environments that I'm currently in nurtures my voice. And so it's a matter of staying in that, got to be comfortable being uncomfortable, and understanding that difference is magic, right? And I think as humans, we have a tendency to only want to be with, what feels comfortable, people that look like us, people that grew up in the same ways that we did or have similar interests. And that's cool. But when we think about the greater scheme of things, or the grander scheme of things, the more you can embrace difference, and specifically difference of perspective, the more magic you create, right? And so I've seen way too many times, and I do some like coaching and consulting on the side. I've seen way too many times where the solution is on the team, right? And it's sitting with that person that might be soft-spoken, right, which is influenced by culture and upbringing, or might be more of a keep my head down and do the work, right? And because the organization is not creating a culture where people feel comfortable speaking up and sharing their ideas and their perspectives, even if it's different from everyone else's. And so now they're paying $500,000 for, a consultant or whatever, when the answer was literally sitting with the quiet person on the team. So I'll say at minimum, build those communication structures and muscles where people have the different channels to surface feedback, to surface what they need, how they need it in a way that's productive and makes business sense. The other thing that I would say for organizations that organizations should focus on is embedding it in how they operate. So it's not a siloed function, right, where it's like a manager training program and there's feedback training and then there's inclusive feedback training, right? It's like making inclusion be the foundation of how a company operates. And the analogy that I love to use is finance. Everybody understands why a company needs a finance team, right? And the finance team drives, the financial strategy, but everyone at the company is a champion and an ambassador of the financial health of a company, right? Because we understand if the company is not financially healthy, we don't have jobs, right? I have rarely heard of companies deprioritizing finance, right? Because companies understand that without a finance team, again, we're not successful. DEI should be viewed in the same way, right? It shouldn't be a negotiable, because what diversity, equity, and inclusion equals is human interactions, people feeling empowered to be their best selves and do their best work. And the way to truly embrace that is by embedding it into how you operate. So it's not a matter of like, we need this specific initiative to reach this specific group of people. It should be the norm in operational if I'll use the word efficiencies or, in operational models. And I know that I'm oversimplifying that and it sounds easier said than done, but you got to start somewhere, right?
That's
and
true.
so
Start somewhere.
At minimum, right? You got to start somewhere. So at minimum, most companies have performance systems, and how we're evaluating performance and how you evaluate performance dictates someone's growth trajectory. It dictates your salary, it dictates your raise, it dictates, the promotion. And so if you're looking for a place to start there and ensuring that process is buttoned up and that process is hyper inclusive. And then from there, you'll start to uncover all the other areas, right, where you need to embed inclusion that not only benefits your underrepresented employees, it benefits everyone. And I always say, when you build with the person with the most need in mind, everyone benefits up the chain. So.
Okay. So you are really this evening dropping some stuff, dropping some things, and I appreciate you really diving in. I know that you're trying to keep it in layman's term, but also still giving us a good amount of concrete information that we could walk away and be like, okay, I get it. I have to start first, because your words are going to inspire the next person to possibly step up in their office or in their community to provide this, right? And if not, they're going to
Yes.
go knocking on doors and looking for individuals like yourself to come in and help in that,
Right.
ask for advice. So I appreciate you, mentioning that it is a hard task, and mentioning how
Right.
at certain places it could be fun and enjoyable when everyone understands what the mission is, but also
Right.
when people don't understand the mission and it's like
Right.
misconstrued, and people are like, well, I showed up to the diversity meeting, so I think that we're all diverse now. No, 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 no. It's
Listen.
it-
Listen.
come on, and it's robotic to some people sometimes. They're like, oh, we go to
Right.
3 meetings a month. I mean, 3 meetings a year. We're good.
Right.
We fill the quota. We got all the meetings in. We filled out that
Right.
survey. We're fine. We got diversity in here. But
Right.
I'm glad you're really like helping to make people understand, if they don't know already, that it is
Right.
it is a big role, and it's a very important role. Now, from your
And it's a
experience,
marathon and not a sprint, right? A lot of
come
people
on.
think it's a one and done. It's a marathon. It's not a sprint. We're always learning. And one thing I share, with the organizations that I work with is that you can't call yourself an ally, right? It's not an identity. It's a verb, right? It's your daily actions, and it's something that someone else has to identify, right? Based on your daily actions and how you're showing up. And it's the showing up to the training is the very small piece of the journey.
And from your experience, like, what is the most common struggle, or struggles that immigrant professionals go through, and how could they overcome that?
Ooh. Ooh. Ooh, ooh, ooh. That's a good question. I would say kind of balancing and navigating two worlds, right? Because I think, and I can just speak from my personal experience, there definitely in my household was, this pressure to succeed and do right by the family name, that didn't always align with, what made the most sense for me. Also to, marathon on a sprint, dispelling sometimes those preconceived notions to operate. And I'll give you a more pointed example. When I was growing up, my dad thought that the path to college was just studying, right? It was just studying and getting good grades. By the time I got to high school, if you didn't have at least 6 or 7 extracurricular activities, colleges weren't even looking at you, right? And so having to come home and explain why I have to stay late, right, was a struggle, because it was like, no, you don't stay late. You just want to hang out and socialize, right? And so I had to activate my own allyship and have, teachers and administrators, reach out and say, like, no, this is actually what's required, right? Fast forward, I want to say 10 years, where I was a mentor to a young lady who was also first generation. And I remember she comes to me in tears, like, I have all these extracurriculars that I want to do and that I need to do, and my parents don't understand. They just think that I want to socialize, and and I don't know what to do. And I was like, okay, calm down, calm down, take a breather. Like, now as an adult, I understand why they would feel that way. My parents felt that way too. So let me support you as somebody that has, walked the path and having that conversation with your parents, right? So I share that example to say it's, navigating sometimes what could be two very different worlds, and also taking what society might frown upon and really understand that that's your superpower, right? Being first gen, especially depending on where you come from, there's all sorts of stereotypes that can be placed upon you. There's all sorts of limitations that can be placed upon you. But I think, the true driver of my success was exactly that, my cultural upbringing. And that has become my superpower in how I relate, how I connect to people, how I can stretch a dollar, how I can really unapologetically say, I'm going to figure it out. And so just really staying true in your authenticity and not forgetting where you came from or even feeling the need to deviate and assimilate, because your upbringing and all that, whether challenging, whether disappointing, or whether super positive, really has contributed to your superpowers. So standing tall in that.
And how can, like, let me see how I can say this now. How can, like, immigrant professionals fit in a company's culture if it's their first or second job in corporate?
Yeah. Ooh, that's a loaded one, because I am of the belief, and hopefully this isn't a controversial statement, I don't think that anyone should try to fit in a company's culture. I think the company culture should try to fit into the person, right? And I'm saying that as a DEI professional, right? But I'm also saying that through the lens of understanding that that's not always a reality, because we got to eat, you know? And so for folks that are earlier in their career, I'm going to flip into my pessimist bag a little bit. It doesn't happen often, but I'll flip into it here, where I think you're going to have to embrace and accept that you may not fit, right, in a company culture right away, especially the first two companies. What you need to do is really get into that art of self-discovery of what type of culture do you want to be in that aligns with you and your values, right? So being very crystal clear on who you are, being very crystal clear on what you value, being very crystal clear on what you want to get out of an organization, just as much as what you contribute to an organization. And the moment that misaligns, it's not a matter of fitting in, it's a matter of finding the place that will fit into you and align with you. So that's my perspective.
Mm-hmm. I respect that. I think that how you saying, like, finding something that's going to fit into you. A lot of times people want to mold to everything around them, but it should work both ways at times. But we should definitely find places that fit our energy, right? That fits our mindset. It fits our movement, in a sense, versus being like, I'm here. This is what I want to do. Could you guys fit this? And then before you know it, it doesn't work out, and you're like, I just wasted like a year of my life. You know, I just, when I could have been in a place that already accepts me for who I am and for the person that I'm going to potentially be in this company. You know, Shai, you done dropped a lot of great information today on the show, and I just greatly appreciate just having this vulnerable moment where we could kind of talk from like real life experiences. When you're speaking on certain things, it brings me back to my days in corporate America and the struggles that I know that a lot of my closest friends and myself, we face, during those times. And to know that there's a lot more emphasis, there's a lot more drive to actually promote this part in a company, I think it's beautiful. Because it wasn't something that I was on the forefront. It was there, but now it's like, because of what's going on in the world of today and all the things that are out there, it's like, okay. And no company wants to be left behind when it comes to this stuff. But some companies are not trying to be the first to make the initiative to really make change. But with people like you,
or disrupt.
That's right. That's disrupt what's going on already. But with individuals like you, and the way you think and the way you move and put in your heart first when you're doing this, it's really making an impact on the people. So congratulations. Thank you so much for just being on the show and just really just sharing this moment in time. And I just want to say, is there any last words you want to share with our listeners?
I will just say it is my pleasure. I really appreciate you. I appreciate this conversation, and I appreciate, what Zaka is doing to provide insight into the experience, right? And, provide the advice from different perspectives. So my final words is, keep this going in any way that I can support and help. I stand by it. It's so needed. And, I'm like, where were y'all 15 years ago? No, I'm kidding. But it's so needed. And I truly appreciate it. And even just the energy that, you all are bringing to this conversation. So.
And and the beautiful thing about these conversations, people could always go back and listen to them again, so it's an honor to have you on the show. And I just want to let the listeners know, if you want to hear more inspirational stories like Shai, please check us out on ZakaConnect.com. Follow our social. at Zaka Connect and follow our feed, Zaka, wherever you listen to your podcasts.